I bought a house for myself, not my sister, and my parents freaked out. I always knew my family had a favorite, and it wasn't me. My sister Ava was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who had everything handed to her. Meanwhile, I was the backup plan, the spare, the one expected to handle things, to be responsible, to sacrifice. I played along for years, but one day I decided I was done. Growing up, the pattern was obvious. Ava got the newest clothes, private tutors, and dream vacations. I got lectures about hard work and independence. At 16, I was flipping burgers at a dingy roadside diner while she was preparing for a summer trip to Europe. When I brought it up, my parents told me I needed to understand priorities. Translation: Ava's future mattered, mine didn't. I wasn't bitter at first. I assumed that's how things worked. Parents invest in the kid they think will go far, and the other one learns to fend for himself. So I did. I worked through college, lived in cramped apartments with roommates who forgot to pay rent, and skipped nights out while my classmates partied. With every paycheck, I put something aside, not sure for what, just knowing I needed a safety net because no one was going to catch me if I fell. After graduating, I had two choices: grind away in a low-paying job or take a risk. I took my savings and opened a small auto repair shop. It wasn't glamorous, and the first year was brutal: late nights, long hours, weekends spent elbow-deep in engine grease. But it paid off. By year 5, I was making steady money, enough to start seriously thinking about buying my own place. My parents knew this. I had mentioned my dream of owning a house instead of renting a tiny apartment, and every time I did, they'd give a forced smile, and the conversation would shift. My mom would sigh dramatically: "Ava's been struggling so much. Rent is so expensive these days." My dad would add, "She just needs a little help. It would mean so much if she had a stable place to live." They never outright said it, but the message was clear: I was supposed to fix Ava's struggles. Never mind that her struggles were mostly self-inflicted. While I was pulling 16-hour shifts, she was living her best life: vacations, designer handbags, nights out at expensive restaurants. Yet somehow, she was the one who needed help. Then there was the money. Over the years, I'd been helping my parents financially, covering home repairs, unexpected bills, even slipping them extra cash when things got tight. I didn't mind at first. They were my parents, after all. But then I noticed little things, like how my mom always had a new handbag or how my dad suddenly had a fancy new watch. At first, I thought they were saving. Then I realized where the money was going: Ava. My parents weren't struggling, they were funneling my help straight into her lifestyle. Then I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop something off. I wasn't planning to stay long, but as I walked past the kitchen, I heard my name. So I did what any rational person would do: I froze and listened while pretending to check my phone. "I'm sure he'll do the right thing," my mom said. "He's responsible. He's been saving for years." My dad agreed: "It only makes sense. He can't expect her to struggle. He's her brother." Struggle? Ava? The same Ava who had never paid rent a day in her life? The one who still had my parents covering her credit card bills? Something wasn't adding up. Then it hit me: they were talking about my money. I stood there, my heart pounding, as the realization sank in. They had a plan where I, without being asked, would buy a house, not for myself, but for Ava. And the worst part? They assumed I'd go along with it, like it was obvious, like it was my duty. I wanted to storm in and demand answers, but I knew how that would go. They'd say I was selfish, talk about family, responsibility, and how lucky I was to have made it while Ava struggled. I'd heard it all before. I needed to think, so I left without saying a word. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my tiny studio apartment with a flickering kitchen light I still hadn't fixed. I thought about every time I'd been told to wait my turn, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd swallowed my frustration and smiled. I thought about Ava, about how she'd react if she knew what they were planning. Would she be embarrassed? Grateful? Or would she assume it was her right? I got my answer the next morning. Ava called out of nowhere, her voice dripping with excitement. She went on about a new place she'd found. "It's perfect," she gushed. 3 bedrooms, a backyard. I can finally move out. I waited for her to mention how she'd afford it, but she didn't, because she didn't need to. In her mind, it was settled. My parents had clearly made sure of that. She even had the audacity to say she'd let me crash in the guest room if I ever needed a place to stay. That was it, the moment I knew I wasn't playing along anymore. The next day, I did what they expected: I bought a house. Just not the one they had in mind. I didn't tell anyone, no grand announcement, no explanations. I found a place I loved, put down my deposit, and signed the papers. It wasn't huge, but it was mine, the first thing in my life that was truly mine. I thought I had time before my family found out, maybe a few months, maybe a year. But life has a way of speeding things up. I was setting up my new kitchen, peeling off those ridiculous live, laugh, love stickers the previous owner left behind, when my phone started blowing up. Missed calls, messages, my mom, my dad, Ava, even extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I saw the text that made my stomach drop. Why did we hear from the realtor that you bought a house? I had no idea how they found out. Maybe the agent mentioned something to someone. Maybe Ava was looking at the same listings. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd made my move, and now the real battle was about to begin. The moment that text appeared, I knew my peaceful housewarming phase was over. My phone kept buzzing, calls, messages, some angry, some concerned, all carrying the same undertone, betrayal. I ignored them. If I picked up, I'd be dragged into a conversation where they'd twist everything to make me the bad guy. Instead, I went back to setting up my place. The previous owner had left hideous wallpaper in the living room, and if I had to deal with anything stressful today, it was going to be that. Then my doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I opened the door. My parents stood there, looking less like loving parents and more like corporate executives ready to discuss my breach of contract. My mom's face was a mix of disappointment and hurt, the kind reserved for when I forgot to call home. My dad had his arms crossed, like he was about to negotiate a hostile takeover. Before they could step inside, I braced myself. The next 20 minutes were exactly what I expected: accusations, guilt-tripping, the whole "we're family" speech. My mom went on about how Ava was heartbroken and didn't know where she'd live. My dad made it clear they were counting on me to do the right thing. And my favorite, the reminder that after everything they did for me, this was how I repaid them. Everything they did for me? Like making me pay rent as a teenager? Like expecting me to fund my own education while they paid for Ava's designer wardrobe? Like letting me work 2 jobs while she got weekend spa getaways? If anything, I'd repaid them 10 times over. I could feel my patience wearing thin, but instead of snapping, I stayed quiet, nodded along, and let them talk. I'd learned long ago that arguing didn't work. They weren't here to listen, they were here to push their narrative. Then came the ultimatum. My mom, her voice full of forced calmness, said I had 2 choices: transfer the house to Ava or be cut off. I had to stop myself from laughing. Cut off from what? Their love and support? The same love and support that always came with conditions? The same family who never offered me anything without expecting twice as much in return? I told them I'd think about it, not because I would, but because I wanted them out of my house. They left, looking victorious, like they'd cornered me into submission. I took a deep breath, walked into my kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down, and stared at my phone. More missed calls. Ava had finally texted, and I could guess what it said: something about me ruining her life, something about how she'd counted on me. I opened it, and that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold: a message from Ava, not meant for me. She'd accidentally sent it to our family group chat instead of whoever she was texting. The message detailed how she and my parents planned to break me, to keep up the pressure until I caved and handed over the house. There it was, plain as day, confirmation that this wasn't about fairness or family. It was a coordinated takedown, and I was supposed to roll over. I took a screenshot, saved it, and sat there for a minute. For the first time in years, I felt something shift: not anger, not sadness, just clarity. They'd never seen me as family. I was just a resource to tap into as needed. So I decided I wasn't going to argue or explain myself. I was going to show them exactly how done I was. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. If my family wanted a battle, they'd get one, but on my terms. I wasn't going to argue or explain myself. I was going to take control and make sure they knew I was done playing their games. First, I locked everything down. I called my bank to ensure no one could access my accounts except me. I updated my passwords, secured my documents, and installed security cameras around my property, just in case. Knowing my family, I wouldn't put it past them to try something desperate. Then I contacted a lawyer. I wasn't sure if my parents could cause legal trouble, but I wasn't taking chances. After explaining the situation, the lawyer reassured me that as long as everything was in my name and I hadn't signed anything for Ava, I had nothing to worry about. That was good news, but I still wasn't taking risks. Later that day, I got a text from Ava. She was willing to talk, but only if I was ready to make things right. I ignored it. A few hours later, my mom texted, saying she was worried about me and thought we should have a family dinner to discuss everything. Yeah, right. I wasn't falling for that trap. Instead, I flipped the script. If my family thought they could manipulate me with pressure, I'd apply some of my own. I went on social media and made a simple post: nothing dramatic, nothing directly calling them out, just a picture of my new house with the caption, "Finally home." Worked hard for this, and it's all mine. The reaction was immediate. Friends and extended family started congratulating me, commenting on how much I deserved it. Then the real fun began. Ava didn't comment, but I knew she saw it. A few hours later, she texted, not so polite this time, unloading about how selfish I was, how I'd humiliated her by making my purchase public. Apparently, her friends had asked why she wasn't getting a house if I could afford one. Her ego took a hit, and she didn't like it. Then came the phone call from my dad. No more fake concern, no more "we're family" talk. He was angry, said I was embarrassing them, said I was ungrateful. I let him rant, then when he asked what I was going to do to fix this, I gave a simple answer: nothing. That's when the threats started. If I didn't do the right thing, I could forget about being welcome in their house again. My response: sounds like a win-win to me. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for standing my ground. I didn't feel like I owed them anything, because I didn't. I blocked Ava's number, muted my parents' calls, ordered takeout from my favorite barbecue joint, cracked open a cold beer, and sat on my new porch, watching the sun set over my hard-earned property. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. The silence didn't last long. By the next morning, my inbox was flooded with messages. Ava had gone full meltdown mode. My parents were in damage control. Apparently, extended family members saw my post and started asking questions. The last thing my parents wanted was for people outside their circle to realize how messed up this was. I could almost hear their conversations, my mom frantically spinning the story to avoid looking bad, my dad grumbling about family duty and how I'd betrayed them. And Ava? She went nuclear. She was ranting in the family group chat and airing her grievances on social media. I scrolled through her posts, long, dramatic captions about how hard her life was, how she'd been betrayed by those closest to her, and how she was struggling to find a place to live. I nearly choked on my coffee when I saw she'd started a GoFundMe titled, "Help Ava Get the Home She Deserves." The audacity was almost impressive. The description was even better. She painted herself as the struggling sister whose cold-hearted brother refused to help her. She left out the part where she expected a free house and had done nothing to earn it. The donations? A grand total of $20, probably from one of her equally entitled friends. I was a little disappointed. If you're going to commit to a scam, at least make it believable. The situation was getting ridiculous. I needed to shut it down before it spiraled further. I had no interest in an online family feud, but I wasn't going to let them drag my name through the mud. So I dropped one last bomb. I made a new post, this time with receipts, screenshots of Ava's text where she admitted to planning with my parents to pressure me into giving her my house. I added no commentary, just the screenshots and a caption, clearing up some misunderstandings. The internet did the rest. Within hours, people started calling her out. Friends who'd blindly supported her went silent. Some turned on her, realizing they'd been manipulated. Ava deleted her GoFundMe and locked her social media accounts. My parents weren't handling the heat well either. Apparently, extended family members asked why they thought it was okay to demand a house from their son while coddling their daughter. By the end of the day, the family group chat was silent. No more guilt-tripping messages, no more passive-aggressive calls, just silence. It was glorious. I sat back, watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone free of notifications. I had a cold drink in my hand, a playlist of my favorite songs playing, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't worried about what my family thought or whether I'd done the right thing. I had done the right thing for me, and that was enough. The silence lasted a full week, no calls, no texts, nothing. I expected my parents to try one last desperate move, but they seemed to realize I wasn't budging. Maybe the public embarrassment sank in. Maybe they were regrouping. Either way, I wasn't getting comfortable. Then, just as I was settling into my new life, a surprise arrived, certified mail. A thick envelope with my parents' return address, the kind that never carries good news. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in one hand, letter opener in the other, bracing for whatever nonsense was inside. It was a legal notice. My parents were threatening to sue me. I had to read it twice to ensure I wasn't hallucinating. They claimed I'd misled them into believing I was buying the home for the family's benefit and had unjustly enriched myself at their expense. It was absurd. I'd never promised anyone anything about giving my house away. But their desperation had reached new levels. The best part? They demanded compensation for the emotional distress I'd caused Ava. She was so distraught over not getting a free house that they thought she deserved money. I laughed, then called my lawyer. The conversation was short. He barely held back his amusement, saying the case had no chance in court. At best, it was a scare tactic, at worst, a last-ditch effort to manipulate me. I wasn't worried, but I wasn't letting it slide. If they wanted to escalate, I'd escalate right back. I made a few calls, one to my bank to triple-check everything was locked down, another to a locksmith to reinforce my home security. Then I sent my parents a certified letter, informing them that any further harassment would result in legal action. 2 days later, the phone calls resumed, first my mom, then my dad, then Ava. I ignored them all. They left voicemails, some apologetic, others still trying to guilt-trip me. My mom's was the best. She went from sobbing to furious in one message, demanding to know how I could turn my back on my family over something as small as a house. The irony nearly knocked me over. If it was so small, why were they going to court over it? On the third day, I picked up when my dad called. He skipped pleasantries, going straight to business. They'd drop everything if I agreed to work something out with Ava. I told him there was nothing to work out. That was the last straw. He exploded, ranting about how selfish I was, how I'd betrayed them, how no son of his would treat his family this way. I'd heard it a dozen times before, but this time, I felt nothing. I let him talk, then calmly said I had nothing left to say, wished him well, hoped they'd move on, and hung up. That was it. The legal threats dropped. The guilt-tripping stopped. My parents seemed to understand I wasn't giving in, and Ava went radio silent. Either she realized she wasn't getting anything from me, or she found another target to latch onto. For the first time in my life, I felt free, no manipulation, no obligations, just me, my house, and a future that belonged to me. I had won. The first few weeks of freedom were an adjustment. I'd spent so long waiting for the next round of manipulation that it felt strange to wake up without dreading a passive-aggressive text or family ambush. My house felt like a home, not just a place I had to defend. I could focus on myself. I got into a routine, waking up early, hitting the gym, cooking real meals instead of grabbing fast food. I had time and energy to enjoy the little things, like sitting on my porch with coffee, watching the world wake up. It was the kind of peace I never knew I needed. But peace never lasts forever. One afternoon, while working from home, I heard a knock at the door. My gut told me who it was. Sure enough, Ava stood on my porch, looking less like the sister I grew up with and more like a desperate salesperson on the last day of the quarter. The entitled confidence was gone, replaced by something that almost looked like desperation. I didn't let her in. I stepped outside, arms crossed, waiting for her script. She started with awkward small talk, then got to the real reason. She'd thought about everything and realized she'd been a little unfair. She wasn't asking for a house anymore, just a place to stay for a little while. I nearly laughed. A little while? And then what? I'd let her move in, and suddenly I'd be paying her bills while she lounged on my couch, complaining about how unfair life is? Not a chance. I kept my response simple. She had parents who'd bent over backward for her. Why not stay with them? That's when the truth slipped out. She wasn't welcome there anymore. After everything, our parents' reputation took a hit. Relatives who enabled their behavior weren't so quick to take their side. Even some of Ava's friends had distanced themselves. Turns out, when you go viral for trying to scam your brother, people don't want to be associated with you. Ava wasn't just looking for a place to crash, she was looking for an escape from the mess she'd made. I didn't take the bait. I told her I wasn't interested in fixing her problems anymore. No hard feelings, but I wasn't responsible for her choices. Her expression changed, the fake humility dropped, replaced by the same old bitterness. She called me selfish, said family should help each other. I shrugged. She left in a huff, making a dramatic exit that might have worked when we were kids, but all I felt was relief. A few days later, I stopped by the mall to pick up a few things. While waiting in line at a coffee shop, I heard a familiar voice. It was Ava, talking loudly to someone at a nearby table. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice carried like a megaphone. She was complaining about how hard life was, how she had to get a real job like a regular person, how exhausting it was, how she couldn't believe people did this every day. The woman she was talking to looked like she was seconds from reminding Ava that most people have been doing exactly that forever. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. It was too good. Instead of saying anything, I grabbed my coffee and walked past her table. She didn't notice me. As I stepped outside, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time, I wasn't dealing with Ava's drama. Someone else got to hear her monologue about life's injustices, and that was fine by me. Later that evening, I got a text from my mom, a last-ditch effort to guilt me into reconsidering, something about how family sticks together and how she couldn't believe how cold I'd become. I ignored it. They'd spent years making it clear I wasn't part of their definition of family unless I was useful. Now I understood something important. I wasn't cold. I was just done. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone.